Hi, Dave. How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Great. Thanks so much for being our second speaker on our Impact and Influence series. We're really grateful that you could give us your time, given what you've got going on in your life at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be asked.
You got a fair bit going on. What's happening in your life?
Well, there's heaps going on and nothing going on at the same time because of these bloody lockdowns. So
Sounds like real estate.
yeah, correct. I think everyone's in the same boat. Yes, I've just sold my business very unexpectedly, but look, a really good opportunity had come up, and after a bit of soul searching, I decided that it was the right move and it was time. And I've got a really meaty role to head into in the ACT. So we're moving to Canberra, which I'm excited about. And yeah, we're sort of in that in between at the moment, trying to move to Canberra in the midst of a lockdown. But once it all happens, then we'll get there and settle in. And yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know Dave, he's had an incredible career in real estate. Very, very modest human that you are. I've had the pleasure of knowing Dave for a long time. We used to work together in a previous life. Dave, do you want to just share with everybody how your real estate journey got started and what that's looked like or evolved over the years too?
Yeah, sure. So I'm one of these people who, as a kid or as a high school student, wanted to get into real estate. So when I was 16, I think as part of year 9 or year 10 work experience, I did work experience at a real estate agency in Wagga. I grew up in a little town about 45 minutes away from Wagga, and went and did this 2 weeks worth of work experience. It was a Rain and Horn office at the time and loved it. I thought it was the best job. I thought that just all the aspects too, not just being a salesperson, but anything to do with real estate. I just thought it was amazing. And so when I finished year 12, my parents coincidentally had just bought a house in Wagga, and the agency that they'd bought it from was looking for a junior, a bit of a gopher, all-rounder, shit kicker person just to put up the signs and go and meet the pest and building inspectors. And so it was a little sales-only office, and that was my start. And from there, I got into sales with that agency for a couple of years, moved to Sydney and was in Sydney then for 8 or so years, 7 or 8 years after that, and held a couple of jobs in franchise management, and then also was a trainer for REI and SW. And then, like all good country boys, it was time to go back home to the family, so I moved back to Wagga, and had a couple of jobs there, back developing a rent roll for that original agency that I first started with way back when, and then a general management role for the Remax office until I started my own business in 2014, which originally was a property management specialist business. Wagga's a really good rental town, so it's one of those good big regional centres that has a fairly transient population. We're very heavily supported by 2 defence bases, a university campus. It's the health hub for the Riverina, so for the outlying district. So there's a lot of people come to Wagga, and there's a lot of people that come and go in and out of Wagga. So because of that, because of our affordable median house price, our strong rental yields, our low vacancy rates, it's just this perfect melting pot. It's always been this perfect melting pot for investors to purchase, particularly investors from Sydney and Melbourne and Canberra, who maybe can't afford to get into renting or investment property in those markets, want a higher return on investments. So no one had ever done it. Back in 2014, it was probably just after the advent of these specialist property management businesses had really come to the fore. There were obviously some big players like Leah J and Newcastle and things that had been doing it for a long time before that, but it was really the turning point, I think, or the start of operators going out and thinking, you know what, I can do better than just be the byproduct of a big sales office. I can specialise in property management and have property management as the sole focus of an agency, and that's what I did. So that was in January 2014.
What an incredible career! Like, it's just been amazing. And what would you say to anyone that is starting their career, that are listening to this, about patience and tenacity and resilience?
Yeah, 100% patience is the key. So this is now my 20th year in real estate. So 20 years since I finished school and started that little sales-only independent office in Wagga. And back then, 18-year-old Dave Skow would have said, I want to be the biggest and the best. I'm going to do this overnight. No one's going to have done it as good as I've done it. And a very typical attitude, I think, that a lot of newcomers or young people particularly have to industry. And I think it's important that people very quickly realise that that's not the case, and that's not a realistic objective typically for an 18-year-old kid out of school. There are probably exceptions to this.
Would you do anything different that you've done in the past?
Probably not. I don't think so. I think the experiences that I gained from starting at the absolute bottom and just watching and learning from some really good mentors, and I've still got really good mentors now that I've had for nearly that whole 20-year period, and learning from people within different parts of industry as well that don't necessarily have any bearing on me, but I know that I could pick up the phone and call Greg Jemison at Jemison Fisher whenever I needed to if I've got a question or wanted some advice, because I've known him for a long time through our work at the RUI together. People like yourself, I know that I could ring at the drop of a hat and draw on the experiences that you've got that I might not have. So I think it's surrounding yourself with really good people, people that have been doing this for longer than you have and that have more experience than you have. But patience is the key. I think that you could look at any property professional in Australia who has got 20 years or more under their belt, and typically they're all pretty successful, because I think that it's only the successful ones, or the ones that have got the tenacity and resilience and patience, that get to that point of success after such a long time.
And I think you are a real product of your environment in this industry.
For sure.
Yeah.
And look, there's plenty of environments that aren't conducive to growth and conducive to good experience. And I think people can quickly realise when they're not in the right environment. And it might not be because it's not a good environment, it's just not a good environment for them.
Yeah, 500%. And I think, Dave, I know we've spoken about this a lot before. When you're younger, sometimes you're really intimidated by people in the industry or successful people. And you and I share the same thought and same mantra that if you are getting going in industry and you want to have a real crack, then surround yourself with the successful people, or pick up the phone and connect with the people that are successful, because they're more likely to give you their time, because they remember what it's like. You know, we all started as gophers and we've all come through the runs and earned our stripes. And I think anyone is very receptive of people that want to have a go.
Agreed.
Crack. And
I think it's so much easier now too, sorry to cut you off, Cos. I think it's easier now with the advent of social media for those relationships to be able to develop without actually having to meet these people. I had a beautiful video message from the lovely Ellen Bathgate a couple of days ago. It was in line with my birthday and some congratulations about selling the business. And we have never met face to face. We just have never had the right opportunity to meet, but I feel like we've known each other for 5 years. And I know that I could ask her anything, and I know that she could ask me anything. So yeah, I think the advent of social media and the ability to connect with people that you actually don't or haven't had the opportunity to come face to face with is really good and important for people like myself who were in the regions, and accessibility to training face to face and things like that just isn't as great as what you might see in metro markets.
Yeah, and I think that's important. That accessibility piece is incredibly important, particularly because we're DNA in real estate, where we've got to be with people and be one, and we're tactile. And I see a lot of people struggling at the moment in lockdown because if they are working at home and they haven't got that interaction with people. But I think forgetting, or don't forget, guys, about picking up the phone and FaceTiming and have a good discussion. We're on Zoom all bloody day with meetings. Yeah. But the importance of that connectivity from a social point of view, when you're just talking to friends. So look, we weren't prepared to go to that space, but I'm glad that we have. But what I really want to talk to you about, because I'm working with some pretty amazing people at the moment on some merger and acquisition stuff. It's something that's really interested me for a long time. I'm really keen to hear about your experience with, I was shocked when you phoned me and said you'd sold. Tell us sort of, how that came about, or what your learnings were for anyone else that's thinking about maybe going on, down that journey in the next 12 months.
Yeah, cool. I was shocked. It really came out of the blue. And I've been lucky enough to have experience now in both the acquisition and the divestment of an asset. The acquisition piece is interesting because I think there's a lot of talk now about, particularly in New South Wales, where there isn't the ability to assign responsibility under a management agreement. So typically buying a rent roll of 300 managements means getting 300 management agency agreements signed by 300 landlords, or however many landlords there are in that rent roll. And it's a task, and it's probably the point where retention is the biggest concern, and the drop-off of the seller is the biggest concern by not being able to convert those over to the new operator or the new rent roll. And so I've seen instances now where it's much more common for businesses to be sold holus bolus by way of shares in the company being sold, which is how I sold my business. But I think that we only had the ability to sell my business by way of a sale in the shares of the company because it was such, without blowing wind up my own backside, it was such a sale-ready business. It was ready to be sold at any point. And that was really important to me because, particularly in Wagga, where our ability to divest that business to a competitor is pretty limited. So we're a town of 70-odd thousand people. We've only got 13 agencies. And admittedly, they're big agencies, like the top 3 agencies are 1,000 plus managements, sales staff of 7, 8, 9, 10 salespeople. But that means that there's a real limitation on when the time comes to want to get out or have to get out. There's a real limitation on being able to do that. And there was 2 examples that I know of in recent years where agency operators had to sell. They were forced to sell due to ill health or to age. They had no succession plan in place, and they were on the market for sale, which is not something that we usually see in Wagga. Like, little rent rolls transact off the books, and the 2 rent rolls that I bought were off the books because of the relationships I had with the principals of those businesses. But they've really hurt. They've sold to out-of-town interests who just don't get it. They try and run them remotely, and whether that's the right model or not, and I'm sure there's a way to do it, but it hasn't been done right. So they've had a lot of retention issues, staff retention issues. And so that was a real wake up to me to not get in a position where if something happens and I had to sell, I want to be able to sell it straight away. I want it to be sale ready. And just making sure, and it's basic stuff, but it's basic stuff that doesn't get done because A, it's mundane, B, it's time consuming, and C, the old situation where a lot of agency principals aren't necessarily property management focused and they rely on their property management staff or head of department to make sure that everything is in check is good, but it's not always the case. And unless you've got a real good grasp on the rent roll as the major asset in the business, you're just not going to know that it's that all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted.
And know what's going under the hood. And I think it's a thing you talked about, you know, selling the asset. And there's some really cool structures around now that seem to have really grown momentum in the last couple of years, where you've got, you know, assets that are owned by companies that don't actually trade, and services agreements around that. And probably, you know, what I'm hearing from you is always be sale ready if the opportunity comes knocking. And I think is that importance probably of, like, you're incredible at property management and you can sell as well, and you knew that your rent roll was clean, but it's probably just that health check probably every 2 years. Would you think of someone coming along and saying, look, let's just have a look under the hood if you don't know what's going on, and make sure you are in fact sale or merge ready if the opportunity.
And outsource it. Spend a couple of grand, the $5 grand or the 10 grand that it's going to cost depending on your rent roll size, to a professional to get in there for a couple of days and pull it apart and then put it back together. And that's the best 5 or 10 grand that you could invest in the quality of the business that you've got.
Now
100%. And I'm not without sin either. Like I did our it was when COVID first hit. So it was sort of April, May last year. And I had a lot of time on my hands. And so I went through our numbers really diligently. I had 2 bloody car insurance policies on one of our property management vehicles. There was something else, I can't remember what it was, but I embarrassed myself and I thought, come on, you think that you're better than everyone else. And here you are, idiot, with 2 car insurance policies.
The human, which is what I love that you
100%. Yeah, 100%. And without that annual or 2-year check, that would have just gone in perpetuity, and I would have wasted a couple of grand a year on nothing.
Yeah, and we look at the resources that we, you know, sometimes invest in our sales businesses, which, you know, it's few and far between that we hear about businesses selling now and getting anything for their sales business, potentially if they've got a selling principal that is the majority of the income. Yet, you know, poor old property management sitting over there that often pays the bills and is our asset when we retire or we decide to do something else. But when we look proportionally at where the resources are going in the business, it's not always to the right channel. You were very good with marketing, Dave, with your property management, and from an outsider looking in, it looked very instrumental in your growth and what you did. What would your hints be to anybody listening today around property management and marketing and scale?
Really define the very basics at the start is really to define that point of difference that you've got within your own core market and those unique selling propositions that you want to sing to the masses within your local market area. That's something that we did well right from the very start, and that really stood us apart from those 12 or 13 other agencies, and that led to really quick growth for us. So we had signed up our first 100 managements within 6 months. We did 202 new managements within the first 12 months of business. And then we did over 200 new managements every year for the 5 years that we were, 4.5 years that we were property management only. And that was due to really honing in on what we did well and what we did better than the rest. Michelle Williams and At Home Launceston are very, very good. So if people want another example of an agency that is in play at the moment, check out the At Home stuff. They're very good at marketing their USPs and points of difference. Just tracking where your spend is. I think that I see too many still agency principals just throwing money at marketing and hoping something sticks and never really monitoring whether it does or not. And I think really having a focus on this is how much we're spending on this medium, this is how much we're spending on this medium or this campaign. What are the results that this brings in? Is it worth doing again? Or do we scrap that and try plan C and plan D and see what sticks? And you can quickly identify what works, and then you just funnel all your marketing budget into those areas, and all of a sudden the leads just come.
I know there's a lot of offices in metropolitan Sydney that would love to have growth of 200 a year organically, and your growth was phenomenal. And watching in the background, and I did stalk you guys a lot on social media because I always use it in training as an example of what we should be doing. What had most impact for you, and what was the best success or the best, where you projected money? What was the best ROI?
Social media marketing for us, for sure, and really developing brand champions within local community through those social media channels. So there was a point where if someone within Wagga had posted on the local buy swap sell page or community notice board on Facebook, looking to rent my house out, who do you recommend? We would consistently be at 8 out of 10 comments in favour of us. And that was because we'd spent a lot of time developing our social media profile and creating those brand champions within community that would get on there very happily and say, Dave Skow, Wagga Property Management, some of our property managers within Wagga Property Management. That was the best return on investment for us, mainly because it was cheap. Like it didn't cost us a lot of money to do those things or to create presence through, and it was only Facebook, particularly 2014 when we first started. Instagram wasn't really a tool for business marketing, and we probably never really got involved in it that much. Until we acquired the Remax business and then had a sales arm as well. We did some Instagram stuff after that. But when we were property management only, Facebook was definitely our bread and butter in terms of marketing.
You know what I love about that you knew your channel for your customer. I see so many businesses that try and be, everything to everybody, and they do it all a bit half-assed.
Yeah, and you've got 300 or 400 followers on Facebook and maybe 200 or 300 on Instagram. It's just not enough to.
Your mum likes it, and everyone you work with, and no one else sees it, and all this.
That's all it is. It's just people that you know. So I think we very quickly got to a point where and I think now MacArthur's, who have taken over the business, have inherited our Facebook group, which is a big tool for them, and good luck to them with it. I think we had about 7,500 genuine local likers on our Facebook page, which was, I think, probably double the nearest real estate agency competitor. And it was just a really easy way to sell our message. And we didn't want to try and flog our wares on there. So we never posted, we've just listed this rental property, apply now, because we didn't need to do that. Like the portals were the use for getting tenants. This was just about promoting ourselves to landlords, hopefully, and tenants who would tell their landlords, the landlords that they knew in their lives, that we were respectful to tenants, that we were quick at processing repairs and maintenance issues, that bond claims happened quickly, that we were fair, that we were contactable, and we had high levels of communication. It was just selling that story via that social media channel. And again, I've got no doubt that is a really big reason that we grew as quickly as we did.
I always talk about the pillars of customer experience, and I think everyone, has heard me say them a million times. But when I think about the two, about speed and accessibility and transparency, I don't think I've ever seen anybody in an agency be so transparent on social media around your storytelling and being really raw and authentic. So that was one thing I really noticed that you guys did differently and fundamentally better than anybody else in the country. Yeah, and your market reports for property management, do you want to talk everyone through those?
Yeah, actually, that was probably, and that ties in with our social media because that's the main way that we distributed it. But we very early on, or I personally, because no one else in the office would do it, started a monthly investor report, which was a video. It was 3 to 3.5 minutes. We had cut a deal, and this was back in the early days. So this was probably maybe 9 months after we started. So we were on a very tight budget. I started the business with next to nothing. I had, and I'm very open about it, I had 40 grand that I was able to draw off a mortgage on my own house that I knew
Great
I
story.
had to do it. And it was either, and if it didn't, if we ran out of that 40 grand before we started making money, and I tried, and I'd go and get a job somewhere. But thankfully that didn't happen. But we were really, and I say we, and I get in the habit of saying we from way back then, because I wanted to project this feeling that Wagga Property Management wasn't just Dave Skow sitting in this shitty little 30 square metre office that I rented for $145 a week in the main street of Wagga, because it really was at the start. It was just me. Anyway.
And sorry, to give everyone context, how many properties did you have when you sold?
We did have a couple of acquisitions, caveat, but just under 1,000, 986.
Phenomenal. Yep, phenomenal. Sorry, keep going.
Okay. So yeah, we started this monthly market video report. I was able to cut a deal with a local videographer to, if I committed to 12 months worth of videos, he would do them at such and such a rate. I think they were $330 each video, so $330 a month. And it was just the same format every month. It was, hi, I'm Dave Skow from Wagga Property Management. I can nearly recite it word for word because I did hundreds of them every month. We talked about a couple of success stories for the month. So something that we leased that had been vacant with another agency for a little while, or where we were able to get a higher rental price in a quick amount of time. So really good, positive landlord stories. Then there would be a bit about the office's success. So whether we had been nominated for an award or we welcomed a new staff member that month. And then it would always close off by saying, I'm Dave Skow from Wagga Property Management, Wagga's only property management specialist. And that was the tagline at the end of every one. All our marketing was Wagga's only property management specialists. We drummed and drummed and drummed into every bit of publicly accessible information that we were Wagga's only property management specialists.
Do you know what I loved about it? It was consistent, and consistency breeds trust.
Yeah.
And that is, that is the key foundation piece for a relationship. And I think I've seen so many sales agents do it well. Again, not many of them do it consistently. There's some great ones online now that happen consistently. But I think when I think about property management, that there's a lady from Lisa, who from Place in Brisbane, who does it consistently and does it really well. Yeah. And you're the two in Australasia that I think about with those market reports. And there was no doubt in anyone's mind when they would look at it what you did, what you did well, and what you did better than anyone else. And you just
we distributed it well enough that honestly, I couldn't even count or tell you the number of times, genuinely hand on heart, that I was at the bank teller, or I was at the supermarket checkout, or I was somewhere dealing with someone face to face that I had no idea who they were. And sometimes I wore my badge and sometimes I wasn't, but they would say, you're the bloke from the videos, I've seen you do it before. I had landlords say to me, on a couple of occasions, my dad was telling me that Wagga's vacancy rate at the moment is only 1.1% and days on market's down to 17 days. I said, that's amazing. How did you know that? And he said, because we saw your video. You told us that. So that penetration was, and that made me feel great. Like when those things happened, I thought it's working.
Awesome. And it linked back into your ecosystem. So, I'd go back into your website and then I was in there looking at everything else. So, it was storytelling at its best, but you knew your numbers and you're projecting that. But again, it was just that consistent communication to your community that left no doubt in anybody's mind. So Dave, just to wrap, an amazing story, and you should be incredibly proud of yourself. What's the next journey look like? Are we allowed to share what's next?
Yeah, I've taken a job with Independent Property Group, which is the ACT or Canberra and Surrounds largest, they've got Canberra's largest property management department. So they are responsible for the management of about 3,700 residential properties. They've got a property management team of about 44. And obviously Independent have got sales and strata, and it's a big beast.
Yes.
But yeah, I'll be in charge of the property management side of things. I'm the senior operations manager of property management for Independent. So yeah, looking forward to it. It'd be nice. It'd be a nice change. Geographically, Canberra is only a couple of hours away from Wagga, where obviously our roots are and family and friends are. We spend a lot of time on the south coast where we've got a holiday house, so it's halfway between Wagga and there. My partner has lived and worked in Canberra before, so it just made sense for us. I think, yeah, it's time to explore again, what is out there in the big bad world outside of little old Wagga Town.
Well, we're excited to see where it takes you. We know that you had a lot of opportunity thrown in front of you. I'm going to get you back to talk to us in a couple of weeks and see how you're going with your journey. A lot of these conversations that we're having with influence and impact is around technology. So if it's okay, we might get you in a couple of weeks just to dissect technology specific with property management and talk to that. Can we hold you to that?
Perfect. You can. Absolutely.
Sounds great. Dave, thanks so much for your time today. Hopefully everyone listening, I'm sure, took away value and now understands a little bit more about what they should be focusing on in their business, particularly with property management. Is there anything you'd like to add before we tune out?
I'm probably one of those open books that you talked about, and I think it's really important for industry to have those. And I'm getting to be now one of those senior figures, I suppose. Age, I had a birthday during the week, and I'm getting old, got grey hair, so yeah, I know.
That's good.
But I'm always one of those people that are more than happy to speak to people. So if someone sees this and they want to reach out, get in touch via email, call me, whatever. I'm around all the time. So don't be, and hopefully I'm not intimidating either, but don't be intimidated by people that have done the job before or have had success before. Reach out, and I'm one of those people that you're welcome to reach out to.
Show me your friends and I'll show you your future.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, Dave, thanks so much for your time. Great to chat. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Carl.